Okay, Chandu. So good afternoon, everyone. So we are basically going to discuss the mains questions from the modern history, world history, and post-independence India. So there were total 4 questions from these sections. The first was question number 2, and that basically said, what was the difference between Mahatma Gandhi and Rabindranath Tagore in their approach towards education and nationalism? Right, so the question is simply straightforward. Important aspect ये नहीं है, देखो ऐसे तो you can simply ask ChatGPT also, why to be here, what is the value addition. So how should the mind of the student function? That becomes important. So A, from the perspective of the trend of the UPSC, if you notice the past 5 years, 7 years, then yes, UPSC has asked about ideologies and comparisons between different people. For example, they asked about Mahatma Gandhi's ideology, right? Or for Gandhiji, constructive work was very important. So in another year, in the last 5 years, they simply asked about constructive work also. That is nothing but part of the ideology, because in constructive work, you will be talking about why part of things also, and not just regular constructive work. Then UPSC also asked another time the difference between the approaches of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose and Mahatma Gandhi. So therefore, from how do you analyze the previous year questions, right? There's no shortcut. When you analyze the previous year questions, you're not looking for any shortcut. You're basically trying to see that for UPSC, what is important and how UPSC is asking questions. X and Y is not important. Compare X, compare Y. From my perspective, that X, that Y can be anything. Right? But the point is, okay, ideology is important for the UPSC. And if UPSC can ask comparison with Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, then why not UPSC can ask comparison with Bal Gangadhar Tilak? Why cannot UPSC ask comparison with, Rabindranath Tagore like they asked? So this is how our mind should work. That is with respect to the trend aspect. Second aspect is the mind should work in a broad way, right? It should like you open one door and then you see 3 doors, then aisa kaam karna chahiye. So what is a broad overall theme? Well, Mahatma Gandhi's core theme was basically A, his ideology was of non-violence. Second, morality or spirituality. And obviously, he led the Indian national movement, and therefore, he was one of the top nationalists which we had. And the question is asking about education and nationalism. On the other hand, what was the ideology of Rabindranath Tagore? Now, if you study modern history, then the contribution of the Rabindranath Tagore to the Indian national movement is as such absent, right? Social reforms, maybe you do not talk about Rabindranath Tagore, right? Rabindranath Tagore is more about ethics. He is a thinker, right? He's a global thinker, right? He's a champion in the domain of art and culture. So he'll study much more about Rabindranath Tagore in ethics, right? So he actually comes of more use in ethics and in essay and these kind of scenarios, right? But fine. Usse mein kya pata chala? We get to know that UPSC, right? As I say otherwise also, in how many years our school education got completed? In 14 years. In how many years our college education got completed? In 3 years or 4 years. It is for administrative convenience purposes that we divided it into 4 years or into 14 years or 12 years, right? Similar is the scenario with the UPSC syllabus. It is only for the purposes of administrative convenience that UPSC has divided, and what UPSC, it's like what we humans have divided the different disciplines into, right? So where we need more focus on society, we came out with sociology. Where we need more focus on individual's psyche, we came out with psychology. So basically otherwise everything it is a GS. And history is like a GS, right? What is history? It's nothing but GS before this year. So Rabindranath Tagore, The core feature of Rabindranath Tagore was that he was internationalist. And second thing that we know is that he was also a great personality, great thinker with respect to art and culture. And we call him Gurudev, right? So from that particular perspective, we can look at his education and all of these things also, right? So हमको कुछ नहीं पता अभी. This question is, let's say, you are first attempter or second attempter, and for you this question is a bouncer. So how should your mind function, right? Begin with those things which are the core features of these two particular leaders, and then try to analyze education, and then try to nationalism, and then try to apply these core features in the domain of education and nationalism, right? So for example, first of all, if you begin with education, so Rabindranath Tagore, because he is an internationalist and because he is focusing on art and culture, right? Don't you think that a person who is an internationalist, then we should know what is the meaning of internationalist? Internationalist is a person who does not, nation is summation of people who feel one, equal and supreme. Internationalist is a person who feels that the whole world is one nation. That is internationalism, right? European Union is a supranational organization. United Nations is a supranational organization. Europeanness, Vasudev Kutumbakam, these are internationalism concept. Workers of the world unite, said Karl Marx. He was an internationalist. He did not care that whether you're German or you're French, you're a worker first, right? So in the domain of class, he implemented internationalism. Simple concept, right? So therefore, naturally, with respect to education, Rabindranath Tagore will be focusing on study of multiple cultures, right? Study of multiple cultures. Then, obviously, because he is an internationalist, and in India, industrial revolution is not taking place. But with the help of physics, chemistry, maths, sciences, and other things, industrial revolution has taken place in Britain. And after 1870, it took place in rest of the European countries also. Post 1865, it took place in US also. So for a person who is an internationalist, do you think he is going to have this negative bias towards something which is creating positivity all around? Right? In terms of GDP growth, there can be certain negatives of industrial revolution. That is a separate matter. But why he will not want positive use of the scientific subjects, right? He will want. वो internationalist है, तो जिस तरीके से the way in which education has progressed in the West, leading to industrialization of the economy, development of machines, innovations, why he will not want those things to be there in India? Obviously, he would want, right? In India, kya? Everywhere he would want, because he's an internationalist, right? So therefore, curriculum will be not just focusing on multiple cultures, but curriculum will also be focusing on multiple disciplines, including science and technology. You're focusing on this question from a logical perspective on science and technology, right? And obviously, because he's a person of art and culture, so multiple cultures, so fine, you can say, different talents, right? Study, like, the point is key, I have an advantage because I had psychology, but there are multiple intelligences. Multiple intelligences mean a sports person is intelligent from the perspective of, kinesthetic intelligence, right? Similarly, a musician is a person who is intelligent in a different manner, right? And here we have a person who is famous for art and culture, right? So he would want development of aesthetic sense, or in general, study or the content should be such that different kind of abilities, right? Which you can say, एक English word है aesthetic sense, right? और इसको थोड़ा सा elaborate करेंगे. So he would want music, he would want literature, he would want dance and other art forms, right? That is what he will support, because he's an internationalist, right? He's a person who will not think negative about any other culture also, because he's an internationalist, and he would in fact want people to learn, different cultures. And within the cultures, religion is one of the part of the culture. So therefore, study multiple religions, no problem, right? And obviously, this person will be secular also, right? So internationalists, we used a particular concept and simply in a very logical manner applied it to the things which are around us. We went back into our mind that in our school what we used to study, what all subjects were there. So if Rabindranath Tagore ji is an internationalist, so what would have been his views? And this is how you remove rote learning totally. And even when you have a bouncer, then you can use the content, whatever you have studied so far in your UPSC preparation, for application of this concept and coming out with answer, right? That is one of the aspect. Now, if you apply this particular thing on Mahatma Gandhi, right? So with respect to education, we know about Mahatma Gandhi that Mahatma Gandhi was the Indian national movement leader. And Mahatma Gandhi used, thoda sa pata hona chahiye, Mahatma Gandhi used constructive work. What is constructive work? It is NGO-like activity, as simple as that, right? If you want to start an NGO, right, and if you think that you should work for some NGO, so you are going to do constructive work. Swami Vivekananda did constructive work. Service of Jiva is worship of Shiva. That is help the poor. Constructive. All the NGOs today are doing constructive work. That is what constructive work is. Corporate social responsibility, that is also constructive work, right? And Mahatma Gandhi and the poor, and one of the work of the NGO is to give education to the poor, because these people cannot afford, the poor sections of the society, they cannot afford the costly schools, right? So therefore you make them study. Now, education is not just about physics, chemistry, maths. Education gives you two things from the perspective of Gandhiji and Rabindranath Tagore's perspective also. Education basically gives two things. आप school में क्यों जाते हो? Right? A, values, and B, employability. Right? Values and employability. And we know that who is the biggest champion of value? Gandhiji. Morality, spirituality, Gandhiji. Right? So what will be the purpose? So यहाँ पे ठीक है, study of multiple these things. यहाँ पे basically focus क्या रहेगा with respect to this thing? Mahatma Gandhi कहेगा कि पढ़े जो भी, whatever you want to study, but please include two things in the curriculum. One aspect should be ethics and values. Ethics and values. And these ethics and values for Mahatma Gandhi है ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरो नाम सबको सद्गति दे भगवान, ठीक है, राम राज्य. Mahatma Gandhi felt that religion is a very, very important source. Religion is a very, very important source of ethics and values. So therefore, and common man is not Western educated. Common man knows religion much better than he knows psychology, sociology, physics, chemistry, maths, these kind of things. So you'll be able to connect with the common man also much better if you're talking in terms of religion. So if you want to give value-based education to the poor man, religion is a very good thing to begin with, right? So if you belong to a particular religious community, right, Gandhiji, when he does constructive work, he will have no issues to make interconnections between a particular value and a story in Ramayana or a story in Mahabharata, right? So therefore he does not have a problems, right, with respect to positive use of religion for development of ethics and values, right? It is a very commonsensical thing. इसमें कुछ rote learning नहीं, there is nothing, right? Second component is Atma Shakti. अब क्या है ना कि from zero to hero, study commonsensically, but then try to come out with sophisticated words so that the other person who is checking answers is like, wow, right? This person is like, wow, right? So Atma Shakti, ठीक है? And both of these things, मतलब second fine, हम यहाँ पे बोलते हैं employability. And employability, Mahatma Gandhi called self-reliance. And actually both of these things, they lead to what? Both of these things, they are part of something called Atma Shakti. Right? That is, as a spiritual entity, I should feel strong. And as a person who can earn livelihood for his family or for her family, I should also feel strong. Right? So therefore, ethics, values, employability, these are the things. You can add further things also. As part of ethics and values, for example, Mahatma Gandhi always focused on gender justice or women empowerment. Right? So as part of the values, you can add women empowerment. As part of the values, you can add non-violence. Right? As part of values, you can add a word called morality. Right? So therefore, this becomes the purpose of Mahatma Gandhi. Okay? Education as part of values, for example, social unity. Gandhi did so much with respect to upper caste versus lower caste, with respect to Hindu versus Muslim. Gandhiji did so much, right? And through education you try to build social unity, right? So therefore this will be the purpose of Mahatma Gandhi, and that will be the purpose of Rabindranath Tagore, right? That is the idea. Now if you talk about, let's say, place of education, interconnection is very important. Second component in, why do I say interconnection? Because when we study education reforms, as a student we tend to not interconnect. We study education reforms as a separate entity, and we really hate it. And once we are done with it, after that we're like, we'll see you some other day, go, tata, bye bye, right? But if you do interconnections between a topic which may not be that interesting or whatever, with other topics which are, interesting, then you can come out with these things. For example, in the education reforms, we study about Vadhar scheme of education that was implemented in 1937, right? And what that was actually inspired by Gandhiji. And it is commonsensical. If you have even not studied that, what will INC do? INC will obviously do those things which are influenced by Gandhiji, right? Gandhiji is at his prime in the civil disobedience movement 1930-34. So after 3 years, if Congress is going to form ministries at the province level, and after that, if they are going to do something in the domain of education, don't you think it will be inspired by Mahatma Gandhi? So basically, his method was learning by doing, and which is in line, learning by doing, which is in line with what you call as employability. That is, do not just simply teach, right, physics, but show some, let the students do some experiment, let the students use those tools, etc. So learning by doing. And second component is, another component of the this Varda scheme of things was contact with community, right? That is the school community contact. So if I'm teaching you permanent settlement, I should take you to Bengal. If I'm teaching you Rotwari, and just in case if we are in Madras, then we should go to some agricultural field, maybe see for ourselves that okay, this is what irrigation is, this is how a high yield variety of crop looks, etc., whatever, right? So therefore that was the focus of Mahatma Gandhi. Whereas अब ये थोड़ा सा अलग हो जाता है, but fine. Rabindranath Tagore ji wanted study to take place in natural setting. Kind of similar, but here focus is more on community, whereas here focus is more on natural setting. Natural setting will include this also. I'm not saying that this is a difference. There are many commonalities also, because natural setting will include what I just said with respect to Gandhiji also. But because he's an aesthetic person, art and culture related person, so therefore, nature ke paas aao. Okay, that was one of the focus, right? So this is what is there. So this is how you can compare. Isme you can do further subdivisions. You can say that curriculum, it is based on this, goal is this. You can structure it further into subcategories. For example, you can say goal of education for Mahatma Gandhi ji was ethics and employability, ethics and self-reliance. Then you can mention that therefore curriculum of education would be focused on vocational training. These kind of things you can mention. And accordingly, वहाँ पे goal भी आ रहा है and वो भी आ रहा है. Goal is internationalism, goal is development of cosmopolitan values, and curriculum इस तरीके से बता सकते हैं, कैसे पढ़ाना है, study, ठीक है, इस तरीके से. तो this is how we can say, ठीक है. तो ये education में ये वाला चीज़ आ जाएगा. You can give certain examples also that Rabindranath Tagore ji, for example, he established Shanti Niketan in 1901, and later on he also started a university, Vishwa Bharati University, right? So, Vishwa Bharati University was set up. So some examples you can give. Mahatma Gandhi, you can say, because he was a nationalist. So एक और point add कर दो. Constructive work always included national education. If you study Swadeshi movement, right, so beginning with Aurobindo and others, right, so basically he focused on Swadeshi education. He will focus on Swadeshi education. Swadeshi education which builds cultural nationalism. Cultural nationalism means it fills you with pride for your nation. It fills you with pride for your nation. Swadeshi education, national education. Why? Linkage is Macaulay created Brown Sahibs. Brown size means brown from outside, but British from inside. So how to get rid of colonial mentality? Therefore, Gandhiji supported such kind of syllabus where people they start feeling proud of their cultural identity, right? So therefore, cultural nationalism was one of the focus. Whereas ये हमारे क्या है? Internationalism. ये क्या फोकस करेंगे? स्टडी ऑफ मल्टीपल कल्चर्स, राइट? तो आप ऐसे डिफरेंस भी आप निकाल सकते हैं, ठीक है ना? तो इस तरीके से ये दोनों चीजें, दिस इज हाउ यू कैन कंपेयर विद रिस्पेक्ट टू एजुकेशन, राइट? 150 वर्ड्स आर देयर, यू कैन नोट डाउन लेटर ऑन, ठीक है ना? तो वी हैव टू सेव टाइम फ्रॉम द वीडियो एटसेट्रा, कैन नोट डाउन अगर कुछ नहीं हुआ तो. सेकेंड कॉम्पोनेंट इज नेशनलिज्म, right? So on one side you have Mahatma Gandhi, on other side you have Rabindranath Tagore. With respect to Gandhiji, so if you talk about, let's say, concept of nation, right? So for Gandhiji, if you study about Gandhiji, he was in favor of civilizational basis of nation. Therefore, he is against Western concept of nation. He is against Western concept of nation. For that, first of all, you need to know what is nation. Nation is summation of people who feel one, equal, and supreme. So, why are you an Indian? Why are you a French? Why are you a German? The Westerns, they used to say, that very shallow concept of nationalism was there of the West. If you look same and if you open your mouth and then you speak the same words, then you are one of us. Otherwise, you are not one of us, right? So it was a very surface level concept, ethnicity, language. Whereas Mahatma Gandhi said India is a nation since ancient times, and the basis of our civilization, why we are one, equal, and supreme, is we have a common civilization. And a civilization has multiple religions, multiple languages, multiple art and cultural forms, etc., etc. Right? So therefore, concept of nation is this, right? Whereas if you talk about Tagore, so Tagore actually rejected. Tagore basically did not give his own concept of nation, because if he starts giving concept of nation, then he'll say whole the world is one nation, right? Because he's an internationalist. So basically, he understood the word nation as defined. He understood the word nation as defined by the West. And West में ethnicity and language, right? That is, if these two things are same, then you are one of us, you are part of the nation. If these two things are different, then you're not one of us, you're not part of our nation, right? And from this understanding, because he accepted this definition, therefore, because he is an internationalist, therefore he rejected the concept of nation. And if you'll ask Tagore that what is a nation, he'll say whole world is a nation, which you are calling internationalism, right? So that is the difference with respect to the concept. Second point, because Tagore accepted the definition, this definition of the word nation. So if you'll ask Tagore that whether India was a nation, Tagore will say no, right? If only ethnicity and language, they are the basis to say whether we are a nation or not, then to India has multiple ethnicities, India has multiple languages. So on that basis, in the past times, India was not a nation, right? So India was not a nation in past. That will be the view of Tagore. And for Tagore, इससे कोई problem नहीं है. Tagore is an internationalist. For Tagore, there should not be any nation. In the world, there should not be any nation. Because if you define a nation on the basis of ethnicity and language, this is a very parochial, very narrow view. So one should not think that Tagore is anti-India. Tagore is anti any nation. Tagore wants the world to be one nation. Concept-wise, as we have said, so for Mahatma Gandhi, India is a nation since ancient times. Since ancient times. Why? Because of common civilizational values, common civilizational ethics, which are, for example, if you want to understand, like there are different religions Yeah, or there are different religions which have originated in India. Many of these religions, they have a lot of common philosophies, right? That is our ethical values, or that is our civilizational values. You can give it different format. You can choose any container, but 80%, 70% of the things, right? If they are same, that means there is some least common denominator which is there, which binds us, right? So that is what Mahatma Gandhi said. Then, what was the goal of nationalism for Mahatma Gandhi? So Mahatma Gandhi wanted. So Mahatma Gandhi was against. Mahatma Gandhi was against violent nationalism. Mahatma Gandhi was against violent nationalism. Basically, here we are talking about methods. That is, the nation should not be violent, or the desire for getting rid of the colonial power, it should not manifest itself in violent format, right? So therefore, he was. Tagore is against both kind of nationalism. So Tagore is against concept of nation, so therefore he is against violent form of nationalism. He is also against non-violent form of nationalism. So he is against both form of nationalism because he's a internationalist, right? Then, with respect to religion as a basis, religion as a basis. So Mahatma Gandhi, he said that there can be harmony between different religions. Harmony between religions. Right? So Mahatma Gandhi is not against religion. There can be harmony between religion. But, and therefore, religion can also strengthen nationalism. Religion can also strengthen nationalism. Whereas for Rabindranath Tagore, it is going to be a repeat. So because he thinks of nationalism as defined by the West, so in that particular case, there cannot be any harmony between multiple religions also. Because if you add religion also to the ethnicity, so therefore he'll say, against, he is totally against the concept of nation. Right? So basically he says that if religion is important, or if religion is important part of nationalism, if religion is important part of nationalism, then no harmony between multiple religions. Then harmony is not possible. Then harmony is not possible. Right? So this is what he's trying to say. Lastly, what you can say is that for him, Mahatma Gandhi was also in favor of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. He also wanted unity between multiple nations. Whereas for Rabindranath Tagore, that means for him, nation first or nationalism first, and after that internationalism. For him, reverse is there, internationalism first. That is like a miscellaneous kind of a thing you can conclude with, right? So this is how you can compare the idea of, thoda sa philosophical hai, but fine. This is how you can try to think and come out with certain aspects, right? So ye hai. This is how the things are. Next question that we have is question number 3. Question number 3 says, bring out socio-economic effects of railways. Bring out social economic effects of introduction of railways. Of introduction of railways in different countries of the world. In different countries of the world. It has to be answered in 150 words. With respect to past trend, so in the past, UPSC has asked about industrial revolution, right? If you look at the papers in the past 5-7 years, so UPSC has asked about industrial revolution, UPSC has asked about impact of industrial revolution on India. So one of the subcomponent of industrial revolution was railways, right? So therefore I say, when I look at the UPSC paper or in general, interconnections are very, very important, right? So therefore you should not become what you call as Abhimanyu. Most of the hard-working students, they become Abhimanyu. They study very hard and they start studying vertically, but they do not, they just give up at that point of time when they should have ideally put in some more efforts and come out of it to see that, okay, what all I studied. That is building horizontal interconnections, right? So vertically, industrial revolution, you may know very well. You may know very well that what was the impact of industrial revolution on India, or how did the industrial revolution took place in England. But you never had the time of interconnecting. But if you interconnect, then you'll be able to answer this particular question. And this is a marriage of modern history and world history, because one of the countries is India also. This is a marriage of two worlds. One world, which was the developed world, and second world, which was the colonial world, right? So you would have to include, right? You would have to include both of these aspects, right? Colonies also and the developed countries also, or the industrializing countries also, right? You would have to merge topics of Meiji Restoration in Japan, 1868 onwards, Industrial Revolution in US after 1865, Industrial Revolution in Britain, impact of Industrial Revolution on India in the form of drain theory, right? You would have to talk about colonialism in Africa, right? That particular topic in the world history. And then you would have to come out with these things. So in your mind, you should first go to, let's say, Industrial Revolution in England, and you should make some kind of a flowchart. Then in your mind, you should go towards colonialism in Africa, colonialism in India, right? Industrial Revolution in Japan. And then you should take out certain things, right? Russia, you can also include. You can think about, okay, Russian Revolution, Communist Revolution, worker, right? One of the top workers were the railway workers, right? Aisa, you would have to connect multiple things, and then only you can come out with this answer. Otherwise, straight jacket formula, rote learning will not work at all, right? So if we talk about, let's say, so introduction, it can be that industrial revolution began in 1750 and got completed in 1850. Then you can mention that it was development of a steam engine, which was developed in 1769. In 1814, it was adapted. It was adapted for railways. It was adapted for railways. Initially for cargo trains. Initially for cargo trains, and then for passenger trains. And then passenger trains. So see, passengers, it represents society. Cargo represents economy in a way, right? So this is how it depends on the spot. I'm coming out, with this introduction on the spot, so you can come out with better introductions also. That does not matter. There can be n number of introductions which can be there, right? And then you mentioned that this had huge impact, huge socio-economic impact. That is, you basically repeat the language of the question in slightly different words, and you add some elaboration to the question itself, and fine. That is a very simple way of giving introductions and conclusions, right? So actually introduction or conclusion देने के दो तरीके हैं. एक तो तरीका है, the first way is you simply repeat the question but in different words. That is the easiest. And second is that if you can do some interconnection, right? In the interconnection with the past in the introduction, or interconnection in the future in the conclusion, right? So another introduction can be that industrial revolution began in Britain in 1750 and then spread to US and rest of the Europe and also Japan from middle of 19th century. Railways was an important part of it, right? And this resulted in huge socio-economic impacts. There can be n number of introductions, anyways, right? So if you talk about socio-economic impact of introduction of railways in different countries, so if you begin with one broad thing is that industrial revolution, it resulted in what all things it resulted. See, अगर हम economy में सोचें, ऐसा mind map बनाना है. Economy में सोचें, the first aspect that comes is GDP. Then second aspect is there are different sectors which are there in GDP. Next aspect is that economy, there is element of geography also. that is connection of what you call as buyers with sellers, connections of buyers with sellers, connection of raw materials to factories, and then connection of finished goods to buyers. राइट, इकोनॉमी में ये होता है. और इकोनॉमी में क्या चीज होता है? इकोनॉमी में चलो उसको सोसाइटी का पार्ट भी मान सकते हैं. सो देयरफॉर दीज आर द एस्पेक्ट्स ऑफ द इकोनॉमी. Second component of industrial revolution, if you talk about society, then in society they are different. The first thing that comes to mind is in society there are different classes. One of the class is capitalist class. Another class is working class. Third class is, if you talk about the handicraft sector, that is artisan class. Then peasants are also there. That is agrarian economy. So in society there are classes which are there. Then there are landlords also, that is landed class. In society there are genders, that is men, women. In society there are age-wise also. Age-wise categories are also there. So for example here, relevance, it is about of children. Right? In society there can be movements related to the working class. So for example, working class movement. Right? So मतलब ऐसा कुछ आपको माइंड में आप ऐसा मैप बनाना. ये मैं आपको आंसर नहीं बता रहा हूँ. I am saying that this is how your mind can work in the exam. Just try to organize your thoughts into something and then start thinking about it. Right? Now, if I start thinking about this, what do I get? The first component that comes into operation is economy. So fine. One of the positive aspect with respect to economy was that there was GDP growth. There was GDP growth. And GDP, which was smaller earlier, gradually it became very, very bigger. Because machines, they can engage in rapid production of goods. Right? Machines, handicraft sector person produces goods in a very slow manner. Whereas machines, they produce goods in a very big manner. Right? And initially what was there? This was the agriculture sector. And this was the artisan sector or the manufacturing sector. But after this, what happened? This became the agriculture sector and this became the manufacturing sector. So GDP did not just increase, but GDP also got diversified, right? The economy became industrialized, right? So ये pie chart जो है, this will change for you. That is one of the aspect. Second component is that as economy is expanding, a very natural product of this is that employment opportunities will increase. So there was increase in employment. A lot of jobs were created. And these jobs were new jobs. These jobs were new jobs. Right? Third point, that since the economy is expanding, so can we say that industrial revolution, it also resulted in availability of investment opportunities, which was the class which benefited the most. If investment opportunity for the capitalists. And in fact, you can further add that earlier it was the traders who dominated. Traders are a capitalist, but what do? They purchase goods from one place and sell it at another place to earn profits. But factory owner is a different kind of capitalist, who you call industrial capitalist. So in this society earlier, capitalist group was identified with traders, right? Merchants, money lenders. But now there was rise of from traders to industrial capitalist. So therefore, again, the nature of the capitalist, like here, the GDP nature changed from agriculture to industrial. Here, nature of capitalism is also changing. If you want, you can write mercantile capitalism to industrial capitalism. From mercantile capitalism, mercantile capitalism to industrial capitalism. Why? Because you have mentioned that a lot of investment opportunities also got created for the capitalists. Why? It is basically taking place because of railways. It is basically taking place because of railways. If GDP has to increase from this industrial sector to the industrialized economy, there has to be movement of goods from one place to another. These goods, right, these vehicle or these goods or labor, raw material, finished goods, all are moving with the help of railways. They are moving with help of railways. Employment increase, new jobs. New jobs where? Because of railways. Because railways will become one of the most important sector, right? Investment opportunities. Another aspect is, since we discussed that there, so here you can make a separate category. You can say that because of the railways, there was development of what you call as interconnected economy. Interconnected economy. And this economy can be of two kinds. A, where the industrial revolution was taking place, there the domestic economy is also getting interconnected. That means now the raw materials, they can travel on the railway track to the factories. And from the factories, there can be another railway track to the buyers. Buyers are usually in urban areas, so therefore you can mention that urban centers or urban consumers. Right? So this is how, because of the railways, the economy is getting interconnected. Right? Also, international economy got interconnected. And here, not just railways, अब railways थोड़ी समुद्र में चलेंगी. Railways will not travel in the oceans. But what is happening is that from this particular point, there is a railway line, and this is a port. And fine, then ship is there. That is a separate matter. And then let's say there is another country where there is another port. But again, there is a railway line. Finished goods can move through this network. Raw materials can move through this network. But ultimately, a global economy, a global village in the domain of economy got created. An interconnected global economy got created because of rail to port infrastructure. Rail to port infrastructure. Rail to port infrastructure. So this is how there was development of a interconnected economy. Right? Another component that you can mention is, you can talk about some negatives now. For example, the railways, it basically resulted in what? There was rise of what you call as working class movement. There was rise of working class movement. Why? Because the workers engaged directly in railways and in sectors connected with railways. In sectors connected with railways. Which are the sectors which are connected with railways? अगर आपको train बनाना है, if you want to have a train, should not there be mining of iron and coal? Right? Should there not be a steel sector which converts iron into steel? Right? So therefore, these are the core sectors which are connected with the railways. So therefore, the size of the workers will increase. So therefore, there will be rise of a working class. But, so one component is rise of working class. But workers who are engaged directly in the railways and in the sectors connected with the railways, they did not get right wages, they did not have economic rights. Right? They did not have wages. They did not have social security. They did not have wages. They did not have social security. And therefore, there was rise of working class movement. And in this working class movement, the railway workers, they were the leaders, or the railway workers, they played a very important role. The railway workers played important role. How did they play an important role? When you think about working class movement, the first thing that comes to your mind is Russian Revolution. So in the Russian Revolution of 1905, in the Russian Revolution of 1917, Russian Revolution took place 3 times. Once in 1905, then in February 1917, then in October 1917. And in these Russian revolutions, the workers played a very, very important role. In fact, it resulted in birth of a communist state, right? So therefore, working class movement or class movement is part of society, right? Economically negatively impacted, risen politically, right? So this is what they are doing. Plus, in India also, the first strike that took place by the workers, it was actually by the railway workers. First working class strike, organized strike, it was in 1899. There was this signalers strike. Signalers strike. Therefore, by using one example from India and by using one example from the West, you can say that railways resulted in increase in number of workers, therefore rise of a working class. But this working class was not having rights, therefore there was rise of working class movement, which is a socio effect, right? Political effect also in that particular sense. Next that you can talk about is, for example, you can talk about impact on colonies. Impact on colonialism is that if colonialism, it means exploitation by the foreigners of the indigenous people in the domain of economics, politics and society, then this colonialism, it increased, its pace got increased because of the railways, especially in the domain of economic exploitation. So in the domain of economy, the exploitation increased. The pace of exploitation increased. What increased was pace of exploitation. Earlier, the raw materials are being extracted in a slow manner. They're traveling in a slow manner, right? Finished goods, they are reaching in a slow manner, right? But because of the railways, now zoop, right? Raw materials, they can be taken out of the sources of raw material like in a very speedy manner, right? Similarly, finished goods, they can come from Britain to India, right? With the factory, say railways, to the British port, zoop, then ship, then reach the Mumbai port or some other port, Calcutta port, and there to the urban by zoop, right? And therefore, as a result, economic exploitation increased. Why? Because raw material extraction and dumping of finished goods, raw material extraction and dumping of finished goods, it increased. And it had a social effect also. And what was the social effect? Social effect was destruction. Social effect was destruction of the artisans or destruction of the Indians handicraft sector. Because the goods who were cheaper in price and better in quality, they are now reaching the buyers in a much faster manner. Therefore, people are not buying the goods made by the artisans who use their art, who work with their hand, and therefore handicraft sector, right? So therefore, these artisans, they are destroyed. So that is the social impact. This is the economic impact. Then look at if you want, you can add political also, or you can add social impact में एक और चीज आप add कर सकते हो. For example, you can talk about tribals. So tribals, they witnessed landlessness and forced labor. Forced labor. And they also lost access to their forest produce. And what is this forest produce? This forest produce was called timber, because timber was used in the railways. Because, for example, in the case of India or in the case of US also, when the railways expanded, so land acquisition was done. And therefore, be it the tribes of India or be it the tribes of America, North America, the tribes, they lost their lands and therefore they witnessed lack of land rights. Plus, many of the cases, these tribes were made to do forced labor on these railway projects. Social exploitation is taking place. Third component, timber was utilized for making of sleepers or for making of the coaches, etc. So therefore, the forest produce, which was earlier being used by the tribes, now these railway contractors, etc., they're getting contract to take away timber. So therefore, they're losing their home, they're losing their lands, they're losing their forest produce, and they're also made to do forced labor. So therefore, that is a social impact, right? Another aspect that you can mention is militaries moved faster with railways, and therefore colonization. And don't just limit yourself to India. There will be a tendency that you may forget that you are talking about different countries, right? So colonization, be it in Africa, colonization, be it in Americas, creation of United States of America, taking away the lands of the Native Americans, right? America means North America, that is USA. Here the lands of the Native Americans were taken away. And be it in the case of India, right? Why? Because the militaries, they moved faster. So if there is any resistance, then with the help of the railways, the armies, they can move faster and therefore they can colonize better, right? So therefore that is the impact of the railways. Another thing, you can add a positive also. And positive is two things. One thing basically took place, and that was cultural exchange. Cultural exchange. That is, be it the colonies or be it cultural exchange in colonies also and in the industrialized world also. Because people will move from one place to another, right? So as a result, cultural exchange was much more there. You study about it in modern history also, that because of the railways, the leaders, Marathi leaders, they went to Bengal, Bengal leaders, they went to Bombay, right? And similarly, people, they can also interact much more with each other, right? So therefore, greater cultural exchange was there. Some example, you can make other examples, international example, for example, Russians, they built Trans-Siberian railways. Trans-Siberian railways, right? Similarly, there was Berlin-Baghdad railways. अगर आपको याद आता है तो you can write down Berlin-Baghdad railways, or you can, without examples also, you can mention, because this is a simple commonsensical point which is there, right? So this is what you can say. एक और चीज आप बोल सकते हैं, from your, you can borrow from your society also, society or economy also. If you notice that whenever the government of India comes out with any smart city projects, etc., many of these smart cities, they actually develop along the highways, right? So you create a national highway, and on this side, there can be factories, on this side, there can be cities. And how do you define an urban center? Urban center is a center where more and more population is there, okay? And if you, पढ़ना नहीं आपको वो वाली चीज नहीं है, but if you have studied history, तो all the important cities of today's world, they developed along the trade routes, right? Paris हुआ, ठीक है, या फिर आपका Cologne हुआ, Berlin हुआ, right? So and trade is now taking place with the help of the railways. So basically, because railway is the engine of economy, so therefore urban centers will develop. Urban centers or cities will start developing or rose around railways. This can be a railway station, a railway junction, etc., etc. Right? So, उस तरीके से, right? तो ये है, बाकी एक fun element भी डाल सकते हो. So there is this famous, मतलब ये कोई जरूरी नहीं है that everyone will know about it, but Thomas Cook, right? So basically he, from around your middle of 1850s, he basically started what you call as a travel company, makemytrip.com, ठीक है, goiweaver.com, Thomas Cook Travels, right? That is use of railway for leisure, that is for tourism purposes. or tourism purposes. So therefore tourism industry, it also got boosted. Conclusion, you can conclude this dichotomy. You can conclude with this dichotomy that there were great positives. There were great positives for IR countries. There were great positives for industrializing countries. But there were great negatives for colonies. Plus, domestically, there were great negatives. Domestically, there were great negatives for the working class. Child labor also used to be there. Women were also given lower wages in everywhere, be it railways or anything, right? So, and this was brought to notice by Mahatma Gandhi when Mahatma Gandhi said that railways is looting India. Railways is looting India, right? So from this, so dichotomy is there. Railway amrit bhi hai, railway vish bhi hai. Railway is a boon also, it is a bane also. This is how you can mention, or this was the impact of the railways in the domain of socio-economic impact, right? Then next question that you have is question number 13. Question number 13 is very simple, right? Those students who have studied from me, उनके लिए तो ये तो मतलब हम करते हैं क्योंकि इसलिए, बाकी ऐसा कुछ वो नहीं है. Those students who have studied anywhere, ठीक है, be it vision, be it outside vision, this is a core topic, but ठीक है, हम इसको थोड़ा मसाला लगा के पढ़ाते हैं इस वजह से, तो बड़ा मजा आया मेरे को कि. So the question is, how did the colonial rule affect the tribals in India? And what was the tribal response? It is, if you look at this particular question, you can, in a very simple manner, you can learn so many, such a simple, but one of the most important thing of UPSC. Whenever you are studying anything, right, ultimately you should analyze three things. If there is any event, any phenomenon, why that event took place. Second, features of that event. And third, consequences of that event. If you'll copy this from the coaching institutes, it will not go here. But if you'll do it on your own, then it will be permanently stored here. And among these three also, what is most important is why and consequence. The features part, the what part is relatively less important, right? Because why we should study history as a bureaucrat? The mistakes which were done in the past, why did they happen? And what were their negative impacts and how to prevent them? And the good things which were done in the past, why did that happen? Why did they happen? And what were the positive consequences, right? So basically it is about learning from history. So usme features are less important. You know, that, you know, this battle, you know, XYZ person attacked this person here, then that person there, etc. In fact, ये भी point आप रविन्द्रनाथ टैगोर में कैसे हो? रविन्द्रनाथ टैगोर कहते थे, do not invest time in study of wars when you study history. Study culture. ठीक है, वॉर्स क्या स्टडी करो, इसने इसको मारा, इसको तब मारा, एक्सेट्रा. ठीक है, स्टडी कल्चर, ये वाला पॉइंट आरबीटी में भी ऐड कर सकते हो विद रिस्पेक्ट टू करिकुलम, राइट? एंड लुक एट दिस क्वेश्चन. क्वेश्चन इज, हाउ डिड द colonial rule affect? How colonial rule affect? How colonial rule affect tribals in India? Tribals in India. And what was the tribal response? And what was the tribal response? What was the tribal response to the colonial oppression? Tribal response to the colonial oppression. 250 words it is to be answered. Look, what was the impact of the colonial rule on tribals, right? And but both of these are part basically what were the reasons why the Britishers oppressed the tribals? Impact, this and this is part of the impact, right? Consequences ही पूछा है, simple question, ठीक है ना? तो ऐसा, तो बहुत simple है actually, ठीक है? स्टोरी की तरह सुनाओ थोड़ा सा है, तो स्टोरी की तरह अगर ऐसा सुनाए तो एक तो पहले स्ट्रक्चर चलो बना देंगे हम आपको, बट स्टोरी की तरह हल्का सा बहुत जल्दी से स्टोरी सुन लेते हैं. सो इन जनरल हाउ ट्राइबल्स आर डिफरेंट from peasants. Tribals are different from peasants in the sense tribals can also be peasant, just that tribals they live in hills and forests. That is, they are geographically separated. Because they are geographically separated, so therefore they have always their interaction with the people of the plains, with the outside world, was relatively less. And therefore they used to enjoy autonomy in their society, in their economics, in their politics. In politics, there was tribal chief who used to decide everything. Right? In a way, he is a democratic choice of the tribals by whichever system they are following. Right? In the domain of economy, there were two kind of tribes. One who were peasants, that is occupation-wise, kisani karte the. Second, they were hunter and gatherers. That is those who used to hunt animals and those used to gather forest produce for consumption, hunter-gatherers. And at times they used to sell these things to the people of the plains. Right? So this is their economy. In the domain of society, they have their different kind of religions, different kind of practices. Right? In terms of polity, tribal chief, tribal laws, tribal code of conduct used to operate. That is their particular way of life. How, which marriages are right, which marriages are illegal, social laws, वो भी उनके अपने हिसाब से. Everything was as per themselves. ठीक है? But then what happens? And the Indian rulers, they used to respect their autonomy. Indian rulers, they used to respect their autonomy. But Britishers were lalchi kauwe. Okay, Britishers were greedy. So when the Britishers they came, right, they're like, what was the source of the, why did the Britishers colonize India? The Britishers colonized India because they wanted more money. How did they want more money? They wanted more money in the form of land revenue, that is the taxes. So why these people are not paying taxes? So therefore the Britishers, they expanded their land revenue systems into these areas. Which were the land revenue systems of the Britishers? Permanent settlement, farming system, 1772, permanent settlement, 1793, Ryotwari settlement 1801, 1820, and then Mehelwari settlement 1822. These were the four land revenue systems of the British. In the permanent settlement, what they used to do, for example, broadly, permanent settlement थोड़ी discuss करना है. Broad things are there. Either you make a big landlord, or you create the ryot as the land owner. So impact क्या है? Let's say there is a person who is a zamindar here, zamindar of the plain. You tell the zamindar of the plain that from tomorrow this much land is also yours. And therefore, you are an outsider for the tribals, but now this land is yours. You go into the forest and you collect the land revenue. Or land can be auctioned to the land, right to collect land revenue can be auctioned to the highest bidder, farming system. So here, merchants and money lenders, they can suddenly enter and they are the new boss and they are forcing the tribal peasant to pay the land revenue. Or the tribal chief can be made zamindar. Tribal chief can be made zamindar, that you are now the zamindar, right? So therefore, and so you, and therefore the tribals, they are tenants. You are the owner of the land. You give us land revenue. Or they can make the tribal the owner of the land. That is, now for us, you are the owner of the land and you should pay land revenue to us. राइट या तो रियत को लैंड ओनर बना दो, या ट्राइबल चीफ को लैंड ओनर बना दो, या फिर मर्चेंट्स मनी लेंडर्स गिव देम लैंड रेवेन्यू कलेक्शन राइट्स, और यू कैन सेल देम लैंड्स आल्सो, और जमींदार ऑफ द प्लेन्स दे कैन बिकम द ओनर ऑफ द लैंड्स हियर. एंड दिस इज हाउ द लैंड रेवेन्यू सिस्टम्स came in, and this is how the outsiders they came in. Right, land revenue used to be very high, so therefore these people, they used to lose their lands. Wherever the tribal chief is a landowner, or wherever the tribal is the landowner, they will lose their lands. Right? Why? Because land revenue was very high. Then the government will auction the lands. Or the Britishers, they can say, Mr. Tribal, why don't you meet? Hath dena. Why don't you meet Mr. Moneylender? He will exploit you with high interest rates, but you will be able to pay land revenue. Right? So therefore, oppression in the form of high interest rates. There will come a day when you'll not be able to pay the loan, and therefore, just in case if the Britishers they made you landowner, then you're going to lose that land to the moneylender. And this is how oppression of the outsiders, Indian outsiders, Indian Dikus, outsiders were of two kinds, Firangi and Indian. Here the Firangi outsider is the Firangi law, but the person is the Indian outsider. Right? Second, for example, the Britishers, they wanted land revenue, so they banned hunting. Why? Because they wanted the hunter gatherers to pay some money. So therefore, they wanted to change their occupation. Right? They banned jhum cultivation, which is slash and burn cultivation. Why? Because they wanted settled peasant communities. If I am a British officer, I came and did all the survey, etc. I told you, Mr. Tribal One, you should pay this much amount of land revenue from this particular plot. Okay. When I came to collect the land revenue, yahan sab धुआं धुआं. Everything is burning. Right? Everything is burning. So therefore, what to do? ठीक है? तो ऐसा. तो settled peasant community, तो shifting cultivation was banned. Right? Their focus is only money. So this is how their way of life is changing. I was a hunter gatherer, but now change. ठीक है? ऐसा. Overall ये हो रहा है. Then land acquisition because of railroad projects made to do forced labor on these projects. So this is how outsiders are also coming. Forests Act said that these forests are reserved forests. Tribals are not allowed here. These forests are protected forests. Tribals can be here, but they cannot sell the forest produced to anyone. Third category, uncategorized, open to all. Right? So this is how broadly the things are taking place. Right? We will apply CPC, IPC, CRPC to the tribes. So the tribal chief feels that till yesterday, I was the political person. Now these British district magistrates, etc., they have come. So basically, broadly, this is the aspect. And on these aspects, you can categorize your answer into first point. You can mention about autonomy. That the tribes, introduction may obviously you can write down that since the ancient times, the tribes, they enjoyed autonomy. Right? There was limited interaction with the people of the plains, but the Indian rulers did not hurt the autonomy and the way of life of the tribals. That can be the introduction. However, these things changed with colonial rule. First point, you mention autonomy, and in the domain of autonomy, you can say that the tribes, the tribal chief, and the tribes, they lost their political autonomy. They lost their political autonomy. Why? Because British laws by British officers now applied. So they are losing their political autonomy. Second component that you can mention is that they also lost their cultural autonomy. They lost their cultural autonomy. How? Because since 1813 Charter Act onwards, there was influx of Christian missionaries. There was influx of Christian missionaries. There was an influx of Christian missionaries hurting the cultural practices of the tribes, or religious conversions are also taking place, and as a result, they are losing their cultural autonomy. Right? Third component that you can mention is next point that you can mention is that there was oppression by outsiders. There was oppression by outsiders. Oppression by outsiders. And outsiders were of two kinds, British and Indian. British outsiders in the form of British laws plus British businesses who invested in railroad projects, mining projects, timber projects, plus Christian missionaries, and obviously the British officers. So therefore, these are the British outsiders. Then there were Indian outsiders in the form of zamindars of the plains, in the form of merchants, in the form of moneylenders, in the form of Indian employees or Indian agents of British businesses. So there was oppression of the outsiders, and therefore they lost their economic autonomy. right? This is what you can say. Next point, you can mention that these people, they lost or they witnessed landlessness and loss of home. Landlessness and loss of home. Why? One reason was land acquisition because of different projects, right? And therefore loss of home also, right? Loss of home, right? Again, because basically it is because of land acquisition. Another thing that they are losing is they are losing their right to forest produce. They are losing their right to forest produce. How? The Indian Forests Act, example, created reserved forests where tribals, they were not allowed, and protected forests where tribals could not sell the forest produce. They can use it personally, but they cannot sell the forest produce. So therefore this is what is happening. Then another component that you can mention is impact on livelihood or way of life. Their way of life changed. How? Because of influx of outsiders. Way of life or livelihood. Influx of outsiders and British. Outsiders and British laws. And here you can talk about the LR systems, which were brought by the Britishers in the form of permanent settlement. Zamindars of the plains, they are made owners of the land, or tribal chief is made the owner of the land, etc. Land revenue systems. Then you can mention example, jhum cultivation, it is banned. Hunting is banned, right? And therefore, they were made to do forced labor on the railroad projects. So therefore, there was a very huge negative impact on their way of life or their livelihood. A miscellaneous point which you can mention is in 1871, the Britishers, they criminalized certain tribes, and they said that, for example, if Gujjars are there, that is by default. Look at the racism. They also suffered from British racism. It is a racist attitude that in 1871, the Britishers, they criminalized certain tribes. That is, you are criminal by birth, right? So in this particular sense, all of this operation, it is taking place: economic, cultural, societal, political, right? This is what you can mention. 250 words का है, इस वजह से 100 125 के आसपास यहाँ खत्म होंगे. Then second is, what was the response? Response by the tribals, it can be categorized into 2-3 formats. One simple format is violent response. Second is non-violent response. And third is, for example, cultural response. And fourth can be modern organized response. Right? This is how you can divide. Violent response to every one of you know. Right? So here pre-1857 में number 1 was Santhals. Right? Santhals, they revolted in 1855 for their fatherland, that is their homeland. Grievances were of land acquisition. Right? Grievances were of land acquisition. In 1899, Mundas revolted. Munda Ulu Ulan. Right? Here you can mention that Christian missionaries were also a target, apart from the usual grievances that we have mentioned. Right? So one pre-1857, one post-1857. Then you can mention non-violent response. Non-violent response, for example, you can mention that in the non-cooperation movement, which took place from 1920-22 in Andhra Pradesh. In Andhra Pradesh, there was a person whose name was Alluri. Sitarama Raju, Alluri Sitarama Raju, who basically gave back our pride at that point of time, right? He was like Bhagat Singh, right? So he had participated in the non-cooperation movement in a non-violent manner, but when Gandhiji withdrew the non-cooperation movement, so his views were different from Mahatma Gandhi, like Bhagat Singh's views were also different. After that, so he participated in the non-cooperation movement, but post 1922, he did Rampa Rebellion. Rampa Rebellion. And he made supreme sacrifice for our country, for our nation. Around 1925, I think he was hanged, right? So therefore, non-violent way. Plus, you can continue the non-violent. इसमें however आ जाएगा, इसमें continue the non-violent. So in the case of civil disobedience movement from 1930-31 वाला time period में, और वैसे 1930-34 है overall. In this civil disobedience movement, also forest laws were broken in the form of forest satyagraha in the Singhbhum region of West Bengal. So in West Bengal, forest satyagraha was done. That is breaking of the forest laws. Whichever laws, jum cultivation हो गया, hunting हो गया, या फिर you cannot enter, especially you cannot enter into the reserved forest, right? So therefore, in a non-violent manner, you're trying to enter into the reserved forest, right? So breaking of the forest laws was part of the civil disobedience movement. Cultural response, well, the tribes, they tried to preserve their culture. Preserve their culture. For example, if you borrow it from here, so Munda, Birsa Munda, right? He tried to create a new religion called Brisat. It basically said that there is only one God and that God is not a foreign God. But basically it is against Birsa Munda. He started a Brisat as a religion, or he highlighted this thing where he basically talked against the foreign God. Right? So they tried to preserve. Anyways, modern organized response. So for example, in 1935, this organization was set up called All India Tribal League. All India Tribal League was set up in 1935. Or you can say that अगर आपको ये नहीं भी याद है, then you can mention that at least post 1947, after 1947, the tribes, they campaigned for their separate state, example in the form of Jharkhand, right? They campaigned for tribal rights and the constitution also. So post 1947, the government also and the tribals also, both of them, they are trying to give a organized benefit to the tribals. इस तरीके से you can conclude. Last question that we have is, जल्दी करो, late हो गए. Next question is question number 17. This boring topic, which is at times given as this scheme, this scheme, this scheme, that organization, that organization, that organization, this figure, that figure, that figure, right? If you generate empathy with the farmer, then even such tough things at times, मतलब और याद करने का burden भी कम हो जाएगा. And this is how you can write essay also, right? So that was the idea. तो ये है. तो thank you. God bless you. Take care. Bye bye.